And they do try to do that. I don't think they're nearly as good at it as your average independent bookstore is, but they do try to do that, and they're to be commended for that when they try to do it. Barnes and Noble has also tried to do it. Borders tried to do it on their websites too. But I just don't think ultimately people browse those things in quite the way they browse. Hmm?
They do good.
Yeah, they do. They do good. They do good reads, and yeah, I am sometimes guilty of painting Amazon with a rather broad brush. Yes, sir.
You and then. Question for Kate. When you were deciding how to do the artwork, did you read all the stories completely first, and then sort of come up with a theme, or did you do it one at a time and then create a piece of artwork?
Well, I think I'd read Horse Child a long time ago when it had come out, and then I had read Horseman first, and actually I had read High and Dry before that as well. I'd read that when it came out in Granta, so I had kind of a basic idea of those two, and then as I believe I did the Horseman painting before Interventions was finished, but then at that point, I don't think I started any of the rest of the work until we had Interventions, but no, I definitely had a pretty good sense of the collection before I started, because I knew that I wanted to get, that I was going to be focusing on some sort of mental landscape. And I think I needed to read all the stories to know that that's where I was going to go.
Sir, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, when you were a kid, did you know that you would be a writer?
No, far from it. I didn't. I come from a long line of bullshitters.
Bullshitters.
It never would have occurred to me you could make a living doing it, based on my family's experience. No, I was actually close to 30 years old, working on a PhD in American literature, before it dawned on me one day that I wanted to write stories of my own. And once the bug bit, talk about obsessions. Once the bug bit, I was simply helpless from that point forward. I started writing stories, and I could not stop, and I can't stop. I know I'll continue to write as long as I can hold a pen. No, I never had any notion until probably 28, 29, when I took my first creative writing course. And the only reason I took that was that I was in an office at a large state university, the University of Arizona, with a lot of us TA drudges, and sharing the same office, 16 desks, 32 students, and some were in folklore, and some were in English as a second language, some were in literature, some were in creative writing. The only ones who seemed to be having any fun were in creative writing. And strangely enough, they were the only ones who, at the end of the day, when classes were over, adjourned to a bar and talked about literature. The literature students, strangely enough, did not do that. They were home reading scholarship. But the creative writers were a fun group. They seemed to be having an enormously good time, and they were legitimately far more interested in poetry and fiction and creative nonfiction than just about anybody in the rest of the English department. And so that was the reason I went over there. I thought, I'll take a lesson, see what happens. And very soon after that, I could think of nothing else except my wife and my two, at that time, 2 young children. Well, actually, when I first started taking those courses, the girls hadn't arrived on the scene yet, but they did shortly after. Sir?
Anyway, well, it's a pleasure to see you. I've seen you before, but I hardly know where to start, and I'll keep it a little as short as possible. But I applaud these efforts, because I'm in the book business, and I started out in the publishing business back in the 70s in New York City. I have been a designer. I have part-time Noble, and alive and
Everything you're saying, he would be jumping up and down here.
Probably talk for hours, but yeah. But it's alive and well on a certain level, and it was interesting to see that your case as an artist, that your artwork is what helped to keep the physical book, the art. That's what it is. You know, and what we create are the product. They are the artwork themselves. So.
I agree with everything you said, but God, I hope that the publishing of actual books does not become a niche market.
Exactly, precisely.
Yeah, people have been saying to me, because I've been talking about this a lot, they've said, well, the music industry survived and newspapers have survived, but I'm not interested in surviving, I want to thrive.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was just going to add that when we pulled in and we parked the car and we walked up and we knew that immediately we were going to be happy here because we were going to an independent bookstore and there was also seemed to be an independent record store right across the street. So we thought these people are going to be very welcoming to us.
Independent theater.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
I think you can hear me. You said that as long as you could hold a pen, you would be writing. When you begin a book, do you begin with pen and paper, or do you work with the keyboard?
I still use pen and paper. It doesn't stay just on pen and paper very long. Usually what I write in the morning, I type onto disk in the afternoon. So it's not like it stays in that form very long. I tend not to revise. I go through a series of printouts, but it goes on disk very quickly, and it's because that's the way I've always worked. I came to screenplay writing, interestingly, however, fairly late in life, after the movie of Nobody's Fool came out, and I started doing a little bit of that kind of work, first with Robert Benton and then on my own. And it's interesting because when I sit down to write a screenplay, I just skip the pen and paper, because that's for me a new experience. And I don't know why it should be that way, but maybe because screenplays, there's so much white space on the page, or it looks different. But it came to me at a point where the entire experience was new to me, and so I was able to, for some reason, I was able to adopt a different set of obsessive gestures to go through to accommodate what was, for me at that time, a new experience.
I picked up your lovely book out there, and it's just so refined and understated and beautiful. It's just lovely. When I turned it over, I saw that there's a little bit of a blurb about what the story is about. And of course it was refreshing to not have all the commercial stuff coming at you in the back of the book or the front of the book, or anywhere. Part of the book. But I was wondering whether that was a discussion about whether to have writing on the back and who wrote it. I imagine you wrote it.
Oh, you did?
No, actually I didn't.
I think the editor.
I think our editor at Down East wrote that little summary.
And you were comfortable with that, Kate? Like, in some ways, it was so much your baby.
Yeah. But actually what was incredible is that Down East really listened to us on all of these little things. We had discussions about what was going to be on the back of the slipcase, and also what was going to be on the back cover of each story, and what the paperweight was going to be. And originally the colors of the slipcase I thought were too bright, so I asked if they could tone the colors down on the slipcase. And all of these things they did. I mean, we really nitpicked on this book. We really, really did. but everything about it is considered, and I really like that. So it definitely we were in control. But I think you would notice, you know, I originally said no. I don't think you need anything on the back of the covers. I don't think you need anything on the back of the slipcase. But now I'm so glad that there was somebody there who knew that there needed to be at least some writing on the back of the slipcase. Yeah.
And also, to Downey's credit, every time somebody said, you know, we could bring the price of this book down by so many dollars if we just use a little bit paper that wasn't quite as good or quite as sustainable or whatever. You could just see that it was interesting to be in meetings with them, because every time something like this would come up that would impact the price of the book, you could just see them swallow. you see the Adam's apple bob. And our point was always that this should be a special book. We didn't expect that everybody was going to start making books like this, or that we were going to be starting a trend. All we could say was that this was the way we wanted to do it, and we thought that making the book special would pay some sort of dividends. But they were really. This book was out of their comfort zone so quickly. and to their credit, they just on all the really important matters they went along with us. Yes, sir.
This is one of the everything else kinds of questions. I've enjoyed all your novels, and I've noticed that there's a character that kind of pops up in a number of them.
Yeah.
Maybe more than one, but it's the Paul Newman character from your school. And I've got a question to comment. The question is, when did you meet my father?
Yeah.
I know him so well. And the comment is, thank you for writing about him in such a touching way that helped me be more in touch with his humanity.
Thank you. I had occasion to write something for a group of young writers in Boston. Dave Egger's organization called 826 focuses on teaching writing in workshops to really seriously disadvantaged kids. Gives them a place to go after school, and they do really great, wonderful work there. And I gave a talk at a fundraiser there, and talking just a little bit about the writing life and what's you know, what attracts somebody to it, and why do you stay so long when you know these apprenticeships are tremendously long, and I'm one of the very blessed now, because I make a living by it. Most writers, many of whom their names that you know still have to teach, but you know, I've written both screenplays and novels, and I'm able to sustain we'll put bread and beer on the table through my work, and not every writer can. Very few writers can actually say that. But every now and then you're on the road. It's very solitary work. Writing is very solitary work, and every now and then you're on the road, and you have a moment like yours, where somebody comes up to you and says, you know, you got me through a round of chemotherapy. Or, after I finished your novel, The Risk Pool, I called my father. I hadn't talked to him in 25 years. Boy, you just try, when you sit down the next day to write the story that you're working on then, you just try to hold on to moments like that, because you always want to work well. Of course you want to do the best work you can. But you also want to be worthy of the people whose lives you touched in ways you're never going to know. Unless you say that, I don't know. You know, because I'm as I say, I really only meet you guys on book tour. The rest of the time, I'm in a closet somewhere with or with someplace with only one window, and I don't get out much. I lose in between book tours, and it's very solitary, and it's very special when somebody says something like that. So thank you. And next time, I don't know your mother as well, but I'm working on a book about her right now. So you have that to look forward to.
Has anyone already asked you who you like to read?
No. Dead or alive?
Both.
Both? Well, you know, I'll round up the obvious suspects. For those of you who have been reading Richard Russo books, you won't be surprised to know that Dickens is right up there in the firmament. So is Mark Twain. So is Scott Fitzgerald for The Great Gatsby, and that myth that he created in that work. Rather than shouting out some names of some of my favorite contemporary writers, since I told you before about what I don't like about those ebook things, that they're always telling you about people that you know. Since I've been reading a lot of young writers lately, let me give you a shout out to a couple of younger writers that you may not know. And I could give you a list of, we'd probably give you a list of 75 or 100, but no time for that. So if I were to give you the two tonight, that might not be the two that I give you tomorrow night, but two people to give you now that I think you should be reading if you don't know them already. The first is Lauren Groff, who is, I would say, a couple decades younger than I am. And she is, her first novel is called, I can't slap myself hard enough. Well, you'll find Lauren Groff, G-R-O-F-F. You can go on Amazon and look it up and buy it. But she wrote her first novel is wonderful. But then she came out with this slender book of short stories called Delicate Edible Birds, which I think sold probably 7 copies, and it's one of the best collections of short stories I have ever run across. Look for it. She's got a new book out now called Arcadia that takes on all the great utopian and dystopian stories. So look for her. And if you just want to pee your pants laughing, you got to find a writer named Jess Walter. Jess, J-A-S-S, Walter. His latest book, just out right now, is called Beautiful Ruins. I've loved every word of every book that he's written. I've read them all. This book is a quantum leap forward. It's the kind of book that is so ambitious and wears its great ambition so lightly that you just won't believe it. Okay? Did you want to respond to that as well?
Why did you do that? Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's a slightly unfair question, I suppose. My sister would be better at this. She's the book, she's an anthology of you know, I spend so much time in my studio painting. I'm lucky if I read the newspaper in the morning. No, but I'm actually in a completely different world at the moment, completely obsessed with Shirley Jackson, and I've been spending all year reading everything she's written. So I could tell you nothing other than if you want to know anything about Shirley Jackson. So slightly awkward time to ask me that question, really.
Well, I knew you were going to talk about Shirley Jackson. Our next project that we're going to collaborate on, actually, since Kate has expressed an interest in learning how to write screenplays, now that she's read all of Shirley Jackson and I'm close behind, we're going to collaborate on a screenplay later this summer, dealing with some aspects of Shirley Jackson's fiction or perhaps life. We haven't quite decided yet. Yes.
I have no idea what it would be like to write a book, but when you started, like on your first one, was the whole story there in your head, and when these publishers were saying to you that, frankly, they need to make money on the next 3 books, were there other books where they've told stories in your head, or do you just start by writing?
I'm usually no more than half a book ahead of myself, and that half a book is really all up here. It's not that I've written something else, at least usually not. I write stories for the same reason I read them, which is to find out what happens next. And so usually I don't know very much at the beginning of a book, and I just trust in these characters as they reveal themselves to me that they know what they're up to even when I don't. And usually that's the case. Book number 2, if you think of book number 1 as the first one, book number 2, the next book in whatever the series is, usually has its roots in book number 1. And usually that's because I realize halfway through writing Mohawk that there's something in the story that I can't get at because of the point of view that I've chosen. And then when I get halfway through the risk pool, I think, God, it would be nice if I could get into that father's head, but I've just chosen to tell this story through the point of view of the kid. And so Nobody's Fool is born. There's almost always something, all of my books seem to be born of some sort of dissatisfaction with the book I'm working on. Not because of the character, not because I'm always completely enamored of the characters, but usually the deeper I go, the more aware I become of the limitations that I have set up for myself, usually arbitrarily, right at the beginning of the process. I become aware of all the other books that I could have written if I hadn't said, all right, this is going to be in first person. Why, for God's sake, did I say that? You know, it just seemed like a good idea at the time, and now I'm stuck with it, and by God, the next one's going to be omniscient. And that's my books tend to just... Is there an artistic equivalent of that in your
Yeah, no, I think there is. I think, you know, certainly a lot of artists work experimentally in the sense that, yeah, when I'm working on a drawing or I'm working on a painting, the next painting is just that. It's whatever I didn't do in this one that I think, oh, damn, I wish I did that. And so, yeah, there's a sense of working sequentially, definitely.
How many? What do you think? A couple more questions?
Couple more.
Yeah.
Mine's really, really short.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, is there an order in which you would recommend that we read them?
Oh, that's an interesting question. What do you think?
Here you are.
Yeah.
Is there a 1, 2, 3, 4? I mean, especially given intervention.
Yeah.
Are we starting there and going to the others, or is that going to be our last?
In the galley.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, how was it in the galley? It was intervention.
Interventions was first, and then high and dry's last.
High and dry. I think you do want to finish on high and dry.
Okay.
And then I think with the others it could go.
Well, this is creepy, so not before bed, right?
Yeah.
We know that. Okay.
Yeah. I would almost say start there though.
Start here. Okay.
Yeah. I would start there and then go to intervention and then go to the horse child and then go to high and dry.
Thank you. Okay.
And I agree that high and dry, it makes sense to end up with high and dry, and certainly not to begin there.
Okay.
So yeah, I would start there. But I think the experience is going to be different for those of you who, because 3 of these stories, only one of them has not been published before, and that's Intervention. So some of you, most of you, if you've read anything from this, will have read The Horse Child, which is the title story to my story collection. So if you've read any of these stories before, I don't know whether you would want to reread that to begin, or whether you'd want to put it at the end. So I think it'll differ for each of you depending on whether you've read any of these pieces or not, and whether you want to dive into the deep end with something that nobody's read before, because Interventions was written specifically for this and is not available anywhere else.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I'll let you have the last question.
Kate, do you have any exhibitions coming up of your paintings, or is there a gallery where we could see your work?
Sure. There isn't a gallery at the moment. I had a gallery in Portland, Maine for a while, but unfortunately the recession took care of that. So, but I'm actually, if you find yourself up in Maine in the fall, I'm part of the Center for Maine Contemporary Art Biennial. I was just finished up an exhibition in the University of Farmington in Maine as well, so kind of in between shows at the moment, but I also have a website which is russostudio.com, and pretty much everything I do I put up.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight.